see someone. Wait. I'll let you get up here. The delayed tap. Let's see, still 6 o'clock. I'd like to call the Ordinance Review Committee meeting to order for Monday, March 2nd. First order of business is for everybody to rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Did I see another one? We have someone here for the open forum? Next on the agenda is our citizens open forum. Anybody from the crowd is granted 5 minutes to speak. Seeing that no one is here to speak, we will close the citizens open forum. Then we will move along to agenda item number 1, approved minutes dated February 3rd, 2020. The chair will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. We have a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Moving along to agenda item number 2, discuss chapter 2. This is a revisit of administration from ORC lead member Ken Sidorowicz.
Our revisit is just on section 2.2A, compensation. Last month, I admit that I was hesitant to touch that until Pam brought it up, made mention of it. As she was doing that, I had a flashback to one of my favorite movies, Chariots of Fire, where the British folks are discussing bringing up to the Olympic Committee about one of their runners who did not want to run on Sunday, and these stuffed shirts are sitting around, and they're saying, well, we have to take this is a matter for the committee, and the most stuffed shirt of the group said, we are the committee. So that reminded me that, yes, we are the committee, and I thank Pam for bringing that up. That was my duh moment of the review of that chapter. So, and also thanks to Ann for all the research she gave us on the numbers, et cetera, which we have in front of us. On that list of the cities like 10 to 20,000, the vast majority have a difference between compensation of their mayor and city council members. A few pay $0. Miami Shores pays $1 to both, most of them. Some pay more than Oldsmar and some pay less. A very few pay the mayor and the city council the same. The average for the cities in the 10 to 20,000 population range is, for all of them, 9,200 mayor, 7,800 council, roughly, and those that are paying something, it goes up to 10,600 and 9,000. And as I'm sure we're all aware, since 2006, Oldsmar has been stuck at 10,800 for the mayor and 8,400 city council. My proposal for the consideration of the whole committee here, taking into account the 14-year gap since the last raise, and I'm proposing, like, roughly, give or take, a 30% increase to 14,000 and 11,500. That keeps roughly the same dollar difference between the mayor and the council members. And, 30% give or take sounds like a lot, but considering the 14 years, I would suggest 14,000 and 11,500. And we don't pay any benefits, if you notice from the chart. Something to consider.
Sure.
So your thoughts on those numbers?
Well, that puts us pretty close to Gulfport. And they're on our sheet in terms of size, a little bit smaller, but, nice, desirable area to live down that way. So, anyone care to comment?
I'm thinking maybe I should abstain from voting on this.
Understood.
Should I?
I don't know. I mean, we're not voting, right? So,
Okay.
You're just making recommendations to the council. You're not making a decision on it. So,
right.
my suggestion is you participate.
Okay. 100% increase, no.
I thought I went too low.
Yeah, right, just to get, no, I think 30%
All right,
sounds
so
good.
here's something to keep in mind. Oldsmar is the only city that doesn't pay benefits. And so Oldsmar benefits are approximately, the group insurance would be $9,500 a year. And so these other cities that are paying benefits, you could easily add $8,000 to $10,000
Total compensation, yeah.
on top of that, because that's compensation. And same thing with Safety Harbor, looking at $4,800, but they have $278 for monthly expenses. So if you add that up for a year, that brings them in at $8,148. So they're right in line. So it's
Where we are now, yeah.
how that money's distributed. And so if Oldsmar has no benefits, then that 8,400 is definitely lower than everybody else. I wanted to have some, like, a better idea of, does anybody know the history of why city council people in Florida are paid so low? Like, is there some type of a school of thought that Florida has that they're paid, that their representatives in city government should not be paid very much money? I mean, I'm trying to understand where this comes from.
Partly because of the part-time status or label.
So
How part-time that is, you know.
And then I don't know, I'll take, my recommendation was to go to $14,000 a year for the commissioners, $16,000 for the mayor. I think I would want to investigate more if benefits were something that the commissioners, like over time, if there's randomly one or two people that would take advantage of that, because I'm guessing some people probably wouldn't. So you wouldn't
Right.
want to base a salary on saying benefits when maybe only one or two people might ever take the benefits because they have benefits elsewhere. And if it is temporary, 4 to 6 years, you're not going to give up your benefits at your employer to take these benefits. So it may not be that there's 100% participation for the benefits. And if you're talking half of the compensation is benefits for other cities, then I could justify increasing the salary portion significantly to make that balance more. And then I thought, maybe then it would, add some expense money so that you would have a salary that's higher and then maybe a cap of a monthly expense where you'd have to actually file an expense report, and it wouldn't just be like per diem that's just given to you, but you'd have to, if you had meeting, tickets and meeting fees or gas, and I'm sure some conferences are probably reimbursed.
They get travel reimbursement.
Yeah, they do.
So what other expenses might there be, for a commissioner that would be out of pocket other than, I would think, just time, like going out in the community and being at functions. It takes a lot of time.
Right.
So the benefit piece, I'm kind of 50-50 on that, but if we opted to say, we'll keep it no benefits, then I think we can significantly look at increasing the salary. And so I was, just without even taking into consideration benefits, just looking at what I thought was fair. Just me, myself, and I thought was fair. I was looking at numbers like 14, 16. What that does is it makes it $1 per taxpayer. So right now, it's 60 cents per person in the community, population-wise. And I asked myself if $1 per commissioner per year was a fair amount of money for me to pay for representation on my city government. Well, I was okay with that.
Yeah.
Well, and what I was just doing real quick, based on these numbers, both Kim's and Pam's, is just trying to maybe put that into kind of grasp it in terms of an hourly commitment. What are our elected officials doing? Obviously a lot of people only see their meetings, but as you said, They go out, they have other meetings with staff outside of this room.
There's
So
preparation.
I
And
would
you're
say,
on a lot of like county committees. I mean, I
Sure.
know Linda's on an art committee
Yeah.
and those are meeting
So if
times
you-
outside of city council meetings.
so if you say conservatively, they're doing 20 hours of work a month, which is probably on the low side, I would guess. That puts them somewhere around $60 an hour. And then if you say it's 30 hours a month, then they're in the $40 an hour range, which is, I think it's competitive. And that's what we're proposing versus where we're at now. And that's if those hours add up.
I just got a bid for a plumber to come to my house and it's more than that.
It's costly.
So,
So
I mean, you know, it's all relative.
and like I said, that's conservative with what are their hourly commitments? How much of work are they doing per
Paula,
month?
do you have an hourly guesstimate?
From experience.
I don't know, I do know that Dan puts in a lot of hours, more than just the city council. There's meetings, like you said, planning sessions, meeting with the city manager, you know, the day before the city
Yep.
council meeting, so, I mean, there's definitely time involved.
That's not seen by most, right?
Exactly, right, yeah.
Does he get requests for people to meet with him privately to talk about things?
Yeah, yes, he does. Sometimes that happens too, so,
You'd also have to take into consideration, it hasn't been changed in 14 years.
right,
So
right.
maybe if there's a significant change now, it won't be as significant in a decade from now, whether that's going to change or not. And if we even put into the ordinance that it shall be changed, you know, every 6 years or something
Or
like that.
addressed,
And we haven't addressed that question. In terms of benefits, just to give my 2 cents on it, if it's just for the council member, then would family also be included? So if I get benefits from my employer and I'm the person that has to have benefits in order for my wife and my children to have benefits, then could I drop my benefits? They'd still be insured, but if I'm the only person getting benefits with the council. So even if the option's there, I don't know if it would be taken. So yes, it would be a part of the package, but it's to your point, Pam, where I don't know how appealing that is. It sounds good when you read it. It's like, oh, wow, they offer medical, dental, vision supplemental. Well, how many of the commissioners or council members take advantage of it? But it's part of their compensation. But if we look prospectively to 2034 and we say, wow, 14, 16, man, that seems kind of low. Right now, where it seems kind of high, it's just like, okay, well, we had to take into account that this is probably going to last a decade or more.
Yeah, and that $9,500, I'm sorry, is group insurance, health, dental, vision, life, ADD, not retirement. So retirement is 8% of salary, so that's additional. And some of these had, a couple of them had pension, not many, like St. Pete. Most of them are just medical, health, life insurance. So if you just took that 9,500, you know, what about doing an optional, like they could have the choice between all of it being salary or splitting it between salary and benefits? Some people, the health insurance is much more valuable to them than money, just, so, I don't
And you
know.
also have to keep in mind that they're term limited. So the
Right.
benefits are
Limited.
It's temporary.
brief at
Yeah.
best, yes.
Exactly, yeah.
Mhm.
So maybe it's not worth it to offer benefits if it's just for a short period, you know, just for.
Well, and I bet if we asked, a lot of commissioners don't take advantage of this because they're probably
Probably
employed somewhere
more
else
often
and
than
they
not,
have their
yeah.
own or a spouse has it. And you're right, it's a lot of paperwork to quit and start and go back.
It had to be a decided advantage, right? Where it's like, oh, great, now I've got them through the city, so that's a no-brainer, I'm going to do this. Whereas it's, okay, well, I just got this job as council member, I've got so much on my plate, I know what comes out of my paycheck each month. I know what I'm getting over here.
So I would think it might apply to someone who's self-employed, or
Sure.
maybe someone who's semi-retired. And this was like, oh, wow, I could do this until I get my Medicare. You know, it just, it might be something, but I think a small percentage of people would actually take advantage of it. But if you look at the discrepancy then between benefit package plus salary compared to our salary, we're definitely on the low end.
And we didn't really get that for this whole list then too, with the bigger,
Well, you don't get
list.
the
We only have
amount,
our
but
very
this is
local
coming
area.
from,
Yeah.
So this is coming from the Oldsmar benefits person.
Sure.
So Oldsmar is $9,500 a year. So that's a pretty significant
That's
benefit.
total contribution.
Pardon me?
That's total? Between the employer portion and the,
I just have one number.
okay.
Well, even
And
if
they're
it's,
provided only to full-time city benefits. So I don't know if that's broken down, if there's an employee portion of that, out of that 9,500 or not.
Ken, what was your recommendation again? How much did you say?
14 and
Well,
11.5.
considering benefits, mine was 11.5 and 14,000. If no benefits, you know, Pam's numbers are probably more realistic without benefits. I don't think anybody wants to remain the same. I don't think.
Right.
No, so another question I had was, what budget line item does this come from? Like the salary for city council, what part of the budget is
general
it? Is
fund,
that
right?
an administration budget?
Well, I mean, it comes out, it's in general revenue
general
under the
fund,
council's
yeah.
budget for their compensation.
Yeah, the council has its own budget piece for that.
And I guess they would have to make sure the city could afford
Well,
to
there's a-
raise.
so the increase would be like $27,000 a year increase.
Okay.
So it's 4 commissioners and a mayor. Taking my numbers, we'd go from 44,400 to 72.
Total for everyone, you mean?
Yeah, that would be
So
the,
the differential was 27,000? So it's a
2,700,
20,
oh yeah,
27.
27,600.
27,000.
So you take
Less than
$72,000.
$1.50 per person. You go back to.
Yeah, so
Or not.
the way it is now, it's 44,400 a year. And then with the increase that I was proposing, moves that number up to 72,000 a year. So that would mean finding $27,600 in that budget. And I'm not involved in the budget to know if we're like riding the rail really close to a balanced budget, or if there's wiggle room in the budget for that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's not like it would be immediate,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So it's whatever you guys recommend, and then staff would figure it out based on what council decides to go with.
Tom, a point that Steve brought up about maybe revisiting it in 5 years as opposed to waiting, how would that be handled?
So you could add maybe a CPI increase on an annual basis. You can put in language just says it will be reviewed at the next ordinance review committee being
that-
established. It would be done anyhow, because the ordinance review committee that's established in 5 years is going to do it again anyhow,
And how often does that happen?
every 5 years.
Every 5 years.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's just if they actually think to touch it, which, you know, at first we may not have, and then we went down that route. So if we clear it out in the ordinance where then they're gonna see it, it should be reviewed, but it's
As long
gonna
as it
be
says
reviewed.
increases only, so they can't decrease it.
Yeah, right.
So what you may want to think about is
CPI.
increase it to bring it up to par, what you think it should be now, and then maybe add language in it that says whatever increase the employees get is the increase that the council members and the mayor get, which is going to run roughly 3%.
That's reasonable.
And the question is, you know, is that just the cost of living increase, or is it performance-based like we do an employee, which would be a little bit more? Do you know what the breakdown was this year?
None.
No, okay. You may decide, well, let's just do a flat percentage. It should be increased every year by 3% or 5%.
How would the performance of the council and the mayor be
Yeah, I don't
judged?
think you should tie it to, I'm just saying that I think that,
I'd like to be on that.
Practically speaking.
speaking of performances at the voters, you know,
Yeah,
whether you're
that's
elected
what I'm
to
saying.
the office or
Yeah.
not, but,
You're gonna do
but no, that's what the employees are doing. It's cost of living and performance-based, should be. But for the council members, you may just want to do a percentage, recommend to them. Keep in mind now,
They're gonna do whatever they want.
yeah, they're gonna do what they think is appropriate anyhow, but they're gonna rely upon you and your direction. I mean, obviously, you've taken some time to think about this and you've gathered information, so.
Do you think it'd be smart to put a set increase in there on an annual 1%, 2%, 3%? And then you run into budgetary times where you may have to pull that out, or just leave it alone and let it reset every 5 years?
If it's set in the code, the budget has to make it
Yeah,
Right.
Something has to be done to make sure that it's made, because the code requires it to be paid.
I don't know if you wanna
because I mean,
force the hand
You
there.
need to be
looking
wary
at
of
the
that.
77,000 number, was that it?
72.
At that 72,000 number, it's basically about $15 per household per year to meet that budgetary requirement, which, to support city council and keep them staff and motivate people to run and get qualified people, I'm fine with that.
How about Pam's numbers without benefits?
Yeah, I think that's what
Yeah.
we're,
Yeah.
That's what we've been discussing, right?
Yeah, cause I don't know, I mean, in terms of adding benefits, that's not something that would be done in the code, or could that be changed in this chapter as well? Or is that separate cause it's a
It would be a
benefits?
recommendation to change the code to provide that the city council gets, for example, medical, dental, short-term disability, long-term disability, whatever you want is gonna be, I would suggest that we add it to the code. So there'd be no question 5 years from now that
yeah,
it's.
everybody on here has benefits except for Oldsmar.
I mean, if I'm correct, and I could be wrong in this, 3 out of the 5 current council members are self-employed. Is that correct? So would benefits be something that would be, that's current, I mean, future could be different state, but is a basic dental and medical package worthwhile?
Right, like I know, yeah, right. We're self-employed. We've been paying our own private Blue Cross Blue Shield plan for 20 years, so we wouldn't switch. So,
There's so much of a variance, that you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's just like, some people use, some don't, but then what do you do if they don't? You have an either or, you can have this package or you get this package.
And the savings would
Might
have
be
to
more
be tangible,
complex than it's
yeah.
worth. I'd be pretty happy with a 30 or
changing the
35%
numbers.
bump and have something linked to CPI and call it
Yeah,
a
that's what
day.
I mean. I think
Right.
that's what I'm saying, where it's just like, well, is it worth the hassle, A, and how much of a difference is it? If it's an extra $100 or something like that, then, okay, well, I'm just gonna keep the status quo instead of having to go through all of that, and then potentially having to go through it all again in 3 years.
Right.
And that just doesn't seem, it just seems more burdensome. And who knows when these benefits packages were added to their compensation and what the reasoning behind it was. That's not listed on the paper, so we don't know, and whether or not they even like it. It sounds good, but then it's just like, well, would you rather have cash because you already have benefits? Like, well, yeah, I'd rather have cash, for sure.
Right, and we don't know how many of them are utilizing it either.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Just because it's offered does not mean it's being
We'll have the discussions of, can we rip benefits out and I'll just take the cash instead? Yeah.
How about then
simple.
Pam's numbers,
Keep it simple.
no benefits, and a 5% annual increase?
5% annual?
5%?
I'm just linking to
Five.
CPI.
CPI,
Yeah,
either?
yeah.
That way it's pretty uniform.
CPI better?
If you do it by CPI, that requires a math calculation.
Right.
And it requires finding out which CPI you're gonna use. Are you gonna use the one for Pinellas County, the state of Florida, the southeastern United States, the United States? I mean, what are you gonna use? So it'd be best if we didn't have to look to a chart to determine what it is and just
Straight percentage.
take,
Pick a number.
suggest a percentage. And, it's a lot easier to be done that way, and then there's no question as to what you're using.
Right. So maybe we just recommend a percentage and then the council's, it's gonna be up to the council, one, to accept the values as is, and then they can choose to accept just that and not do the increase or
Right.
change it
Well,
based on somewhat of our
5% is
recommendation.
$700 on 14,000.
Do you know what the average is?
That's kind of a lot.
That's a lot, yeah.
3%.
I think
A
it's
little
about
bit less than
3%.
I was gonna
3%.
say 3%.
3%?
Yeah, cost of living stuff's usually 3.
Yeah.
If you're doing good, 3%. If you're doing stellar,
3%
you
's
might get 4.5, 5.
I like 3%.
I would think 3.
3%?
All right, so we'll say that we're looking at 14,000 for council members and 16 for mayor. Is that correct, Pam? No benefits, and then an annual increase of 3%. Okay, got that, Tom?
Yes, I do.
All right.
And then, do we want to stipulate that it's revisited every time there's a,
It's already.
It's going to
Maybe
happen.
every
right?
5.
No matter what,
okay,
every 5 years.
And then When does the 3% take effect? Do we need to recommend a date?
Ordinance when
Based-
it's created.
Okay.
Would be based on the budget cycle, basically, like as
They
the
may
budget.
say it's not gonna take effect until the upcoming election after the.
No,
one.
I get that. I'm saying is like the annual, so once they move it into the ordinances, when does that 3% increase take effect every year? At budget or
You can pick the date if you wanna do
Fiscal
it.
year.
January
But
1?
you know
or-
what, the way I presume that would be if it was adopted, for example, on May 1st, then it'll be May 1st every year.
Okay.
So, but if you want to fix a date, and keep in
What's the
mind that
budget
we
year
have a
cycle?
fiscal year of October 1 through
October.
September 30th.
October to September.
If you want it to become effective October 1,
Budget year.
you know, you could,
Well, could we do it to where it's, if it's adopted, you know, say May this year, that it wouldn't take effect, the 3% wouldn't be applicable to when this fiscal year ends and then, or when the next one starts, but then let's say October to September of 21 to 22 is when it would start?
whatever you want to do.
It'd make more sense to make it April 1st or May 1st because our elections are held in March, right? So wouldn't
Oh, yeah.
it'd make more sense for it to be as soon as the next crop of council members came in, if there was any
true.
change.
That's a good point.
That you just want to make, it's like, okay, elections
It
March
changes once
17th.
the new people are sworn in,
Sworn in
or
March
just the
24th.
next election year's,
And then it
next
takes
year
place
of the
then.
term starts.
That's right.
But if it's a budget item, wouldn't it make more sense to do it on the budget year so that the budgeting people would know what to expect and it was consistent every year?
Yeah, I mean, that's the
That would
counter.
make it easier.
I mean, I would think that I
One
would
less
just
math
want to always
calculation.
know what that line item is gonna be for salaries. So when will the city council vote on our recommendations? When does that happen?
So you have 9 months to complete your work. You're in your 6th month right now. And I assume that we'll finish this up here in the next month or so, and the report will be issued. And then they'll receive that in another month or so. And then they'll have a work session on it. And then there will probably be direction to Ann and I to create that ordinance and advertise that ordinance. You know, so we're talking 6 months probably.
So
before we
probably
get to-
not by October 1?
It's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible, yes.
October month.
Got a chance.
October's a good.
I mean, it would be nice if we could start the pay raise in the new budget year.
I just don't know. I don't know if any of the current council's members are going to vote for this to go into effect during their term. Voting for their own pay raise. Even though
Somebody's
it's a
gotta vote
recommendation
on
by
it,
us,
right?
you know what I mean?
Somebody has to vote on
Yeah,
it,
they're the
though,
only
otherwise
ones
it
who
won't
can
get
vote
passed.
for it,
No, we don't need to worry about that.
My experience is what happens is they say, we're not gonna put it in effect for us now currently.
Right.
But it'll be start next election or, you know,
Yeah.
at some point, someone is gonna have the benefit of it.
Somebody will.
Right.
Right.
You're always gonna have someone on the council unless you wait 5 years out or 7 years out, that's gonna receive some benefit. Don't get all fixated on that.
Okay.
You should just consider the increase, and if you want the percentage, you know, to be on October 1st every year, we'll just put that in there and let them deal with it, as to when they want it to become effective. They're gonna probably do that anyhow. But, so, October 1, then, is that?
Yeah, I think with the budget.
That makes sense, yeah.
Makes sense, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Do we have anything else for this agenda item then? That was just the sole topic there. All right. Moving on then to agenda item number 3, discuss chapter 26 environment with ORC lead member Steve Graber.
Thank you. In the printed notes, you guys will probably see in some of the back pages, there's some red lines. And that came from staff. So I'll fast forward to those because they're the easiest to see. And then I've got some other ticky-tack stuff because I'm me. But basically, throughout the document, Parks and Recreation is cited. And that begins in section 26-120, creation and establishment of overseer of public trees. Staff wants every reference to Parks and Recreation changed to leisure services. We don't have a Parks and Rec department, we have a leisure services department. So you'll see that change throughout. In section 26-121, duties and responsibilities of the Leisure Services Department, you'll see that the suggested change was to add medians to the definition. I didn't see any issue with adding medians, if so be it. It says shrubs and parks along streets, medians, so along streets and medians seems like the same thing to me, but they wanted it added, so no problem there. On the next page, there's a list that constitutes official street tree species for the city. Above that, Tom, you'll see it says Parks and Recreation in that paragraph, and he didn't, staff didn't change that to Leisure Services, so please make that change if you could. I don't know enough about trees to say that any of these are nonsensical or sensical, so my recommendation is to accept all of them. I'm not sure if there's any white rabbits in there or not, but so be it. The one question I had for staff that I wasn't able to answer, and that was my fault. I reached out to staff last week on Monday or Tuesday. They got back to me on Friday and then had some more comments today. I had a follow-up question today about section 26-123 and 26-124 that wasn't answered. But the suggested change is only small trees may be planted between a sidewalk and curb. And then in 26-124, it talks about the distance from curbs, curb lines, and sidewalks, and then it gives small trees 2 feet, medium and large trees 3 feet and 4 feet respectively. So I needed to clarify that with them, and it'll be a quick, at our next meeting, discussion. Because if we change it to only small trees may be planted in section 123, then we'd have to take out section 124, at least the references to medium trees and large trees. So I was trying to figure out why that was needed. If it was prospective or retroactive, I also needed to know, because I guess you'd have to catch them planting the tree or know it to be new. So I just wanted some clarification on that. In section 26-125, change 10 feet to 15 feet, and that the city shall have the right to request removal within this limit. I think that's already written in there. Basically, the ordinance is there, then it's presumed that the city shall have the right to request the removal, but they wanted this specifically in there, so it's okay with me. If everybody wants to leave it in there, there's no problem. Flipping the page. That next page is all references to leisure services except 26-128. They wanted specifically that a street light is listed in there. I had no problem with that. Tom, in 26-130, there's a second reference to Parks and Recreation that they didn't highlight that needs to be changed to leisure services. And then next page, another list of trees that I don't know enough about. And then they wanted the fines to be in print. First offense, second offense, third offense. We've gone over this in prior meetings. Everything's in the ordinances already. If you guys want the fines listed here as well, then fine, no pun intended. But I just, it's unnecessary, but they requested it. So it's fine with me if we have to list them there. I don't know what the specific fines are, Tom. I can do more research on that if necessary. Or if we just need a site reference there to say, go back and look at section X, and it'll tell you what the fines are.
I have a couple of other sections in your code that actually address this. I don't think it's necessary.
I didn't either. Okay.
And I will tell you that we don't have a tiered offense system or a tiered penalty. It's up to $500 for any violation of the code, and the Code Enforcement Board has the ability to fine $250 a day for every day that the violation continues, and up to $500 a day on repeat violations. I don't think that it's necessary to add it. It may be confusing.
Those are the staff recommendations. If we can flip back to the front of the section, and these are just my own things that I noticed. Section 26-37, use of vehicles. It doesn't specifically say anything about Sundays. I guess if it's an omission, then it means that if it's not specifically stated, then it's omitted, of course. I didn't think we needed to add anything about Sundays, but it wasn't there. And Sundays is listed in different sections, so I didn't know if that was something. The one thing about that, which I'm sure Jared is about to make fun of me, the last two words are as prohibited, and it should be is prohibited. So if we could make that change. You told me it was a grammar lesson last meeting, so.
There's no way I told you that was a grammar meeting.
I've got good hearing. 26-63, illustrative enumeration. Subparagraph 7. I don't know what pollution by creamery means. And I just wasn't sure if this was obsolete language or if that it needed to be done or if there was an industrial term that I just wasn't aware of. But part of the reason that we were brought on was that some of the obsolete terms and uses of the ordinances that we could strike them. And since there were substantial changes in this ordinance section, I thought it was at least worth discussion. Does anybody know? What does it mean? 26-63. The pollution of any public well or cistern of water by sewage, dead animals, creamery, industrial waste, or other substances. So I'm guessing that's dairy products, but I don't know. Does anybody know?
I mean, context clue, I guess that would be.
Yeah. I mean,
What I would guess, but.
right. I just wasn't sure.
Did we used to have like cow farms out here that
Yeah.
there was a creamery here, or?
I
The
have no
answer is
idea.
yes, there used to be Brian's Dairy
Okay,
in the East Lake area, but it was not in Oldsmar.
right.
And it was there in the 70s and 80s, but we don't have any creameries that I'm aware of now.
I mean, I guess that just must mean that's what it is. But when I saw it, I was like, well, is that something we even take the time just to cross out because we can cross it out? Or if it was still necessary, I was trying to get educated on it, to be quite honest. Any thoughts? No?
Probably doesn't hurt
If
to leave
something
it
moved
because
in.
if a creamery does
Yeah,
come in, you
somebody
don't
comes
want
in.
them.
What if some business came in?
And they're just
Would qualify.
addicted to
knows?
pollution by creamery, yeah.
Yeah, but it's
Like a
very
brewery.
broad in industrial waste, and then it's isolation into creamery, like one specific business type.
Right.
I think industrial waste would,
And there's the
Or
catch-all
any-
of other substances. right?
commercial waste,
Like
yeah.
if you get a brewery in town is, that might be a different kind of discharge, I don't know.
Right.
Right.
Well, I guess we can leave it, just in case.
Or you could always change it to like food byproduct or,
You're gonna have food byproduct in every restaurant that sells
Right,
food. Anything that goes down the sink, from washing dishes and so forth, you probably would not want to include that.
I'm fine with leaving it as is if you guys are. It was just something that caught my eye. As we're flipping through, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. One question I had for you, Tom, 26-107, burning for cold or frost protection. It says that a permit is necessary if you want to use an outdoor heating device. So if I've got a propane heater and I'm sitting out in the camping chair, I need a permit to use that if I buy it from Home Depot? I just wasn't sure. Anybody know?
that's only for cold or frost protection for crops.
But if I'm,
It's saying for for agricultural citrus operations.
if that's allowed, provided the fuel, and then, okay, so only that, all right, not bad, good catch. 26-111, permit required for open burning. In this, there's subsection A says his. I think if we were making substantive changes to the ordinance section, we're gonna try to change that to his or her. I see that occur in subsection A, C, and D.
Okay.
You can make that change to his/her, his or her, and that was all.
Where did you see the burning? What section was that?
Burning for
Seven.
cold, yeah.
26
Yeah,
dash
107 for
107.
frost protection, yeah.
107. And I read that first sentence and I didn't carry it down to the second sentence. Sorry about that.
All right, does anybody have any other questions, commentary about this chapter? In their review?
Good job.
All right, I wanted to quickly point out, Tom, I know that we have this chapter here about construction noise, and you know,
Yes.
I've lived in the new neighborhood where new construction was going on. I mean, people come in and do jobs, they're subcontractors doing their thing, and generally, when we've had a couple of issues, we call, I just tell them, call the sheriff's non-emergency line, they'll come take care of it if it's an issue. Is there any way we could word that to where we could require, or if we should require contractors to make sure that that message is conveyed to these work crews, so that maybe, because a lot of times if people just kind of deal with it and don't know that they really can call. So I'm just kind of throwing it out there. I don't know if there's anything we could do to strengthen that or help it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, when Lockheed Martin was redoing their windows, they started at 11 o'clock at night, and there was this machine that was going beep, 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 like backing up all night long for 3 months.
Yeah, right,
They didn't care.
the morning after we closed on our house, the first night we slept there, they poured a slab the next morning at 5 a.m.
Oh, my God.
And I was like, oh, this is a great start to our new house. So,
Right.
but as I said, I just don't know if there's any opportunity there for something that helps get the message out. Because as I said, you know, you've got a GC that's there, they're doing their thing. They're probably pretty cognizant of it. And it's not going on all over the place. And generally, there's not a lot of construction going on in town now. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I don't know, well, first of all, it's basically telling them that they cannot operate within certain hour parameters. They can't do it before 7 a.m. or after 6 p.m. I believe they're notified by the building department
Requirement.
of that noise requirement, that they cannot operate. And obviously, you get an extra hour to sleep in on Saturday before it comes off, and you can't do it on Sunday. I don't know what else that we could do to add. You just wanted to, you're suggesting to add something in the code that says that someone has an obligation to tell construction workers?
Potentially that, and then like a Sunday, I mean, I know I see stuff out there, and generally it's the guys that aren't making so much noise, but I mean, it's construction activity. They might be in there tiling, but then sometimes they're maybe running a tiling saw or something, so it's intermittent noise. But I see guys that are workers that are out there on a Sunday even, but it's just people don't know that they kind of have this luxury to enjoy from not having to deal with the noise. So, I mean, it's very clear, but I just don't know if there's something that we can do to help it. Not that it's a huge issue.
Yeah, I can't think of anything.
Okay.
That's an awareness issue in a lot of the things. Like, for instance, in my neighborhood, everyone parks over the sidewalk, and then I found out that's actually against an ordinance, but no one knows.
Sure.
So,
Yep. Okay, well, that's all I had. Anything else? We good? All right. Moving right along. We are on to agenda item number 4. Discuss chapter 54, solid waste, with ORC lead member Jared Buckman. Jared.
Chapter. Starting off, some interesting findings on this is we've been on a 14-year contract with the Republic. There's some significant recycling concerns coming up with the city because the entire industry of recycling is in free fall, as you may know. So there's some awakenings coming to the residents, if you will, that will come out on recycling. But going into it, in the first section under the definitions, there are 3 definitions of garbage that were commented, and it said garbage dry, garbage household, or garbage moist. Nowhere in the ordinance could I find garbage dry or garbage moist or those definitions being used. And didn't know if it made sense to combine those or put that into one category there. So it's just a comment by me. Also under there, there's a definition of securable gate, which is also not anywhere inside of the ordinances, but it was used in a previous definition under the enclosed gate above. So it's another definition I found not to be used. Scrolling into the ordinances in section 54-4, like the previous chapter, the Public Works Director and everything, they asked for all that to be changed over to Utility Billing Department and Administrative Services to make those changes. I have a red line copy for you, Tom, if you want it, that I can get to you. I'm sorry I didn't get it to Ann before this meeting.
It's all right. I'm just making notes as we go.
What's the reference again?
54-4A, where it says Public Works Director or his or her designees. They want that changed to the Utility Billing Department in Administrative Services. And that happens several times throughout the entire ordinance. In section 54-4 carts.
Can I ask you some questions? I mean, so are these suggestions that staff is requesting?
Staff.
Okay, and they're suggesting that if there is going to be a change, they don't want it to go through the Public Works Director, they want to go through what?
Utility billing.
So who is going to be doing that at utility billing then?
I think they do that now.
They do it now.
It's not an individual, then we need to pick an individual, because you can't pick a department. Otherwise, there is no enforcement mechanism. So, who is, oh my God.
Over Public Works.
Yeah, I know what Nan is, but who is the one for administrative? Sir, is that just, is that Cindy? Or
Yeah,
utility
probably.
billing, who's responsible for utility billing?
Definitely Cindy's the one responsible for utility.
So it should be the Utility Billing Director? Is she a director? What's her?
Administrative Services Director.
Services Director. So is that what you would change that to?
That's when I'm thinking that we want to pick a person.
Okay.
How the hell does this thing work?
Start screwing the bottom. Look at the bottom. There might be something.
Yeah, I know it just opens up, but it's not sitting.
It opens up and flops.
I don't think so.
That's fantastic. Do something like this. I can't remember the word.
Yeah, it's not staying.
Clearly, he's holding out.
Or Mike Myers.
You might be able to hear it if you just lay it there. That's great.
It down.
I'll get another.
Sorry, guys. I know it's.
It's Monday.
Put it in your pocket. It'll
Yeah,
work.
you get to keep that one.
Just put it in your pocket.
They're always preparing.
Okay, so we're gonna do this.
Careful.
Till it fits.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That was recorded, Tom, you know. That was.
Yeah, I know it was.
So you think it should be the Utility Billing
Administrative Services
Administrative
Director.
Services Director.
Administrative Services Director?
Okay. I'll verify that. So I want to make sure we get the right person. I understand the issue.
Yeah.
So,
Because just like down in 54-5, A1, there is no solid waste division. So once again, referring back to that Administrative Services Director.
sorry, where was the next one?
54-5, A1.
54-5A1.
And then A2, additional automated garbage carts are available upon request for an additional fee. There is no specific fee per AL for these services. They can bring a cost in and ask how much the hauler would charge for it, because the hauler would charge the resident for that, but it's typically never used. So they're not sure if they want to leave that in or take that out.
Well, can't you, if you go to,
Republic's website,
yeah, you can
You
buy
can-
another one, right?
you can buy another one from
Okay.
Republic's website.
But staff said that,
They wanted the
that
request to
Republic's?
go through them
oh, okay.
and then through Republic. So it'd still have to go through the city, but what that additional fee is going to change based upon Republic's
Right.
pricing models.
Wonder if there's a cost benefit for that? If it went through the city and the city charged the customer?
It's minimal. I mean, the city's not, it's a pass-through for the city. They're not really making any money on this.
I'm just, if it's savings to the consumer, if the city is the one requesting it, then they get a break from Republic
Well,
Services.
technically, the city owns all of the carts.
Okay.
So they're city-owned carts, so you would have to buy it from the city. It's just whatever Republic's price is to the city. And the city would just charge that fee. But if that fee changes based upon the size of the cart or different carts,
What was the suggested change?
to either list the fee, and they could put a rounded figure in here. Say the fee is, $15 right now, and they're gonna charge 20, just to offset the administrative costs.
You never know.
I just don't know if we wanna lock that in with,
Most of the time when we do fees associated with anything that we do, other than the rates for water, we do it by resolution, so it can change, so that we don't have to have two public hearings and public input and the like. It's usually just done with one hearing or one meeting by resolution. So you probably don't want to nail that down to a specific fee if we don't know, for example, what it is right now. We just do it by resolution.
okay. So just leave 2 by itself, leave 2 the way it is?
I would think it would be best to do that.
Okay. All right. Same section, 2D. Al kind of laughed at this, it's pretty funny. Persons should not play in or around the carts or containers. It's pretty obvious, however, thinking in my brain, I mean, my notes actually say, duh, but seriously, do we need this for any legal recourse because the cities do own the carts?
No, it's not necessary to be there.
Okay,
See, Paul, see?
Strike D.
so strike D. Above that in section C, changing out solid waste division back to the administrative services director.
You can't play around them?
Yeah,
But I think
my kids play on the driveway,
But
which
that's
is
what I'm
right
saying.
around the golf.
we're playing
Yeah.
catch, right?
Don't,
You're too close to the cart.
You gotta define the distance.
Just like, yeah.
It's a safe
Or you
zone around the fence.
You can't run around them in a circle. I don't know. I'm sorry.
no, we had a good laugh. It was, good. It was, trust me, trust me. 54-7, item B, again, listing the solid waste division, need to change that to the administrative services director. Item D in that same section, arrangements for pickup in alleys may be made where such service results in economy and efficiency for the city or its contractor. In talking with staff in the city, there really is no thoroughfare alleyways in the city where that would become efficient, nor do they think they would be servicing any of the alleyways that are listed on the platting. So they weren't sure if that's something we should leave in, that they can make those arrangements, or force the residents to move it to the street where it should be.
I say ditch it.
Ditch it.
I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't foresee alleys being in.
Yeah, I mean, the only
prevalent
alley,
thing
the only alley
anytime
I can
soon.
think of is behind the new Dr. Sanderson office, and that's a dead end. Why would they pull down there and cause more problems? All right, same section, or no, sorry, 54-8, section D. Scattered bulk and yard weight. We weren't sure what scattered bulk and yard waste meant. It's not in the definitions, not sure if it needs to be defined. But basically, the way we thought about this is the spouse throwing the other spouse out and throwing everything out on the yard, and is the only thing we could come up with.
I was thinking of leaves, when people put out their leaves.
Well, I was thinking about the tree, like palm.
Yeah, that's actually addressed elsewhere on the yard waste, on item B in the same section. That talks about bagging it up and 4-foot lengths and different things when it comes to the yard waste. But excessive amounts of yard waste bulk may require a special pickup, which once again, going to that fee structure. Do we need to add language here where if it is enough scattered bulk that they have to hire and rent a roll-off dumpster, or would the city and contractors pick that up?
So the answer to the question is if it's not properly stacked or placed as the code would require it, and it remains there, and they don't remove it, they would be cited
They'll be
by the
cited.
code enforcement department.
Okay, so leave it the way it is?
I think you need to leave it the way it is. And by the way I read scattered bulk and yard waste is tree limbs that are all over the front of the yard. It's not in one particular pickup spot. Tree limbs and yard waste, obviously piles of leaves that are not in any particular form. They're just in piles around the property. That's what I think that that's trying to get to is even though it specifically lifts up above how things are supposed to be placed at the curbside, this is just making it absolutely clear. If you don't do that, we're not gonna pick it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Item E, same section. This is not necessarily the process. If you're using your own container that you bought from Lowe's, Home Depot, et cetera, that's not a city-owned container, they are not going to condemn it first and send you a letter. They're going to stick a sticker on the can saying it's no longer usable, they can't use it to pick up in their trucks, or they're going to put a door tag on your door. So they're not going to condemn the container first and then notify the resident. They're going to notify the resident via sticker or door tag, so.
Right. You wanted to,
Thoughts?
they thought to add something about being
They-
notification?
They think that it needs to be that they'll be notified that the can is no longer usable before they condemn it. And I don't know if we need to reword that section or,
So what if I just take out the words upon such condemnation and just have it read, the owner of the premises shall be notified prior to condemnation?
I think that should be fine. Okay, 54(9)A, semi-public was not defined. No one could figure out what that meant. Our assumption is that is going to be like your office complexes that share a dumpster or multifamily, but that's also defined in, or mentioned in that same section, so. I don't know if we need to define semi-public.
Maybe it's a creamery.
Yeah, we can do that. I need to get with that department and find out what they consider to be semi-public.
They think it's, their belief is for like the dumpster that's behind Spinagle, that's for Spinagle and the apartments above it.
Okay.
So that's semi-public, it's used by multiple,
Like a mixed use
mixed use.
building complex.
And semi-public is again used down in section 5410-A as well. Also in 54-10B as well. Recycling carts, once again, 54-11A1, changing that to Administrative Services Director. Item 2, staff recommended removing that. Not, you can't really get one for an additional fee. You can request additional ones and they'll bring them to you, but there's no fee.
Really?
So you want to take out the words for additional fee?
Yep.
Okay.
You just get another one if you ask?
I've called and they took me from the small one to the large one, asked me if I need another one, but I would, personally on recycling, I'd hold off before you do anything, because it sounds like it might be all going away. But that's a whole nother conversation. 54-12, item B1, once again references solid waste division, that needs to be changed. That's where, 54-15, section, that first paragraph mentions the Public Works Director, and she wanted that changed over to the Administrative Services as well. And the second and third to last paragraph, sentences in that paragraph.
Got it.
Moving on, section 54-19. Contract for garbage and trash services with the owner of the property, the city may bill the tenant. Obviously, if there's a tenant in that property and they're gonna start water services, they're obviously going to have that bill. The changes that they recommended was taking it from the last part of that sentence where it says, the city may bill the tenant or occupant of the premises for the garbage and trash collection services charges at the express written request of the owner.
Okay.
Or just at the written request of the owner, not the express of the owner. And then the last one is 54-23 violations, once again changing the solid waste division in there to the administrative services director. That was pretty much it.
All right, thank you.
Can I get that copy from you on it? I mean, I think I got them all, but when
Yeah.
you're done with it, I'd appreciate that.
I can email it to you.
Perfect. Thanks.
Any other commentary from this chapter from anybody? No?
I had a couple things.
Have at it.
Section 54-13, or excuse me, 14, subsection A4. It says organizers shall be responsible for all fees associated garbage and recycling collection as identified in the special event permit.
Associated with?
Associated with, thank you. Section 54-16,
I didn't catch up.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to catch up. I was
my bad.
5414
A4,
A4.
I need a with between associated and garbage.
Thank you.
5416 subsection B, I didn't know what a red tag was. Jared went back and forth, and I'm glad he did, through the different definitions and whether they were brought up or not. Is red tag defined previously, or do we just, do we take it to mean and kind of know you can't, that means cease and desist until further notice?
We're on 54.
5416 subsection B, it says, city building official may suspend or red tag a construction job. My guess is that's nomenclature in the business, but I didn't know what it meant. I mean, I could figure out what it means, I guess, meaning stop work.
They put like a tag on the dock box or something, maybe?
No, it's,
Yeah.
it is part of the construction lingo, and that is it is basically a notice to the contractor that they are not to proceed on that particular portion of the project until such time as they correct something that they've
Okay.
done incorrectly.
All right,
But that's what that means in the building industry, the red tag.
okay. The only other thing I had was section 54-22, lien for charges assessments when effective. Subsection A talks about how they're an automatic lien, basically. It doesn't say it specifically. But it doesn't say the liens need to be recorded. It becomes effective immediately upon the distribution of the service. Basically, once I charge you for it, you got a lien on your property for it. I understand. This comes up in a lot in what I do. And so if you run a title search, you're going to sell your house, and they run a title search, and they look for liens, and they look for on and on down the line. Now, you may have a spectacular title searcher who says, hey, I also need a utility bill report. What ends up happening is that the new owner goes to sell the house, and they say, hey, you had these unpaid utility charges from 2015. You owe me $3,000. They file a claim against their title insurance policy, and there wasn't any lien. I don't know what to do. I can't help you. Is there a reason that ordinances are drafted that way? It's really for my own education, but I don't think that's fair to the citizens to say, hey, this is a super lien and it's there and a good title search is going to find it, but if they don't, you're not really covered. You're going to have to pay it.
Yeah, so the idea is that you do not want everybody else in the city paying your bill.
Right.
And so that's what it is that we have a enterprise fund that we have to collect for every service that we provide. And this is the way that we can make sure that we're going to collect it. And, and obviously when it gets to a point where there's an outstanding dollar amount, we actually do have a lien process where it is prepared and it is recorded. This is basically to pick up the stragglers.
Okay.
Between the time when the service is provided and the recording of the first lien. Once we record the first lien, there's language in it that says not only is this due, but everything else that comes due on the same account will also be due.
Right.
So this just catches the gap. But yes, all city ordinances are like this.
Mhm.
There are two statutes, 159.17 and 153.67, that deal with this exact same thing. But it does put a super priority lien in place for water and sewer and garbage.
Right.
So I'm not sure that I would suggest any changes to be made here. We have to have similar language in it to make sure that we catch stuff that hits in the gap.
Right.
And then from a practical standpoint, a good title insurance company anyway should contact the taxing district or ask about open permits, and that's part of all that we captured, our office does.
Right.
But there's also title insurance, which should come into play as well.
Right. And it does sometimes if there's a lien that's recorded, and then other times you have to put your hands in the air and say, there's not really much I can do. A friend of mine worked in title insurance once. There's not really much I can do to help you. Sorry. So if you guys ever go to sell your house, according to my friend, make sure they run that search because they're there. And you turn around and you go to your title insurance, and what they'll say is it wasn't of record. There's nothing there we could have found. And so they'll say, well, you could have called and inquired about this, right? And so I didn't run the search. All I know is your policy doesn't cover it because it wasn't of record. Just letting you know. That's why I brought the question up, yeah. And they're super priority liens, which means you got to pay them. There's no getting around it. And they'll just take it out of your bottom line when you sell your house.
Interesting.
Or so I've heard.
From a friend.
Yes, from a friend of mine.
Anything else, Steve?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. Moving along, we will go to agenda item number 5, discuss chapter 62, taxation, ORC lead member David Enos.
All right. I understand there might be some information that renders this section inoperative or no longer in use, Tom, is that?
So we know that we're tracking a bill right now in the Florida legislature that may make the regulation of businesses preempted to the state. Obviously that has not run its course yet. And so I was just bringing it to the attention of the committee the last time that, just keep in mind that this may just completely go away. I will tell you that there has been discussion like this and bills like this in the past, and they talk about them, and they talk about them, and then they never pass. So I don't really think that there is a huge chance that it happens. But there's been a lot of weird things that are going on with regard to home rule, and there's a lot of loss of home rule by the Florida legislature creating statutes that basically takes all sorts of power away from the cities. And, even though I don't think that it's going to happen, I just don't know.
Okay.
So, but your role is to look at this,
Yeah.
whether or not.
For what it is, yeah. Okay, very good, thank you. I just wanted to check the status of that because I'd heard that. Wasn't sure. Thanks for passing it along. Okay, so not a whole lot of changes, guys. Actually, this is gonna be much quicker than one would think when you look at how many pages there are here. Because in my meeting with staff, I met with Cindy, Marie, and Michelle. Most of the things they actually did defer to state. They said that's the state code, state statute, what have you. So I had a lot of questions for them, but at the end of the day, it all came down to that's what it is in the state, so that's why we have it here. But I'll kind of go through some of my notes. In paragraph 62-31, there's a reference to fuel oil. I was just wondering, do we need that? Is it still in place? And they said, well, it's in the Florida code. So that's why it's in here, but I don't know if anybody's still using fuel oil at all. However, the staff recommended no, but keep it in because that's the way the code reads. All right, let's go, we get to skip a few pages. Tax receipt here. There is one, 62-59, section 6259. I believe there's a date there that staff suggested was inaccurate. They refer to August 1st, when they said the date should actually be July 1st. Okay. And then moving on down, transfer of license, which is 62-62. There's a lot of references to percentages, dollar amounts, and things of that nature. I guess my question is, are we just gonna defer to the code, the state code, or do any of these numbers need to be looked at or changed? Percentages, it reads, any business receipt may be transferred to a new owner when there is a bona fide sale of the business. Upon payment of a transfer fee of 10% of the annual local business tax, but not less than $3 and not more than $25. And presentation of the original receipt and evidence of the sale. I'm assuming that that'll probably just defer to the state.
So my suggestion is that you don't change that, because when you change that, it may affect how the state sees how we are charging our fees for business taxes, business tax receipts, which requires an additional step for us to create a commissioner and have a survey done and the like. And so I think that you're covered. The idea there is to cover the administrative costs of changing the paperwork. That's really what it is.
Okay.
So I would suggest that you not touch that. Unless staff is telling you that our cost is more than 10% of the annual fee of when we do that paperwork.
Nope, we're good.
Know the answer to that question.
Perfect. And let's see, most of these again, state. There were no recommendations at all by staff until actually none, for the most part. There's a page, let's see what page is this. This is in section 62-77. 62-77, there's a long alphabetized list of various fees in there. I mean, the list is quite long. And, and I asked staff, what do they, do any of these need to be looked at or revised? They kind of just said it's based upon state code. So I don't know if there's anything in there, Tom, that, needs to be looked at that jumps off the page as being unusual or too low or too high.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to the question of whether it's too low or too high. I can tell you that, again, if you change these, then we have to have that, we have to go through an additional step. Doesn't mean we can't do it. We have to go through an additional step when we modify these numbers. I think it's more than 5%, is the way the statute reads. Now, obviously, as you can see, the more expensive business tax receipts are those ones that are frowned upon.
Right.
Such as adult bookstores,
motel.
adult performance establishments, adult theaters, and so forth. $1,250 for those versus, in the $50 to $100 range.
Right.
I don't believe we have any of those in Oldsmar.
Yeah.
We're lucky.
All right.
Out of curiosity, breweries would just be under restaurants?
That's a good question.
If they're not making food, they're not a restaurant.
Right. Or is it just a bar? Just curious with that coming in.
Well, I think that it could be two different things. It could be if it's a manufacturing and they don't sell, they don't have a bar, then it would probably be under, some type of manufacturing product.
There's also tavern.
Yeah, there's under beverages, they've got distributor or wholesale. And then beverages non-alcoholic, plant C manufacturing, but I don't see beverages alcoholic.
They might get hit with two. You know, like a
And
Tampa
you said
Bay
there's
Brewing
tavern?
Company, they've got the sales restaurant side, and then they've got the brewing.
The manufacturing side.
Manufacturing and distribution side.
And they're both separate LLCs.
I would think so,
Oh, I know so. Talk to him.
yeah.
He's got it all separate.
Yeah. Okay, the only other one, it's a numbers thing. I was gonna ask about 62-96, but it's the same thing. It's the percentages, that go into the firefighters pension fund. But again, if we make any alterations to that, I assume the same rule applies. You would need a whole separate, head count to figure it out. 62-96. I guess it closed in 2014, right? So that's, the pension fund is closed and now it's handled in a different way.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, we can do some research on it.
It's now state-run.
You were asking whether or not the 1.85% tax is appropriate, is that the question?
At one time it was, but it was basically, it just deferred to the state code.
Right, it's referring to chapter 175. So whatever the code, whatever the statute
Yeah.
provides is whatever is gonna control.
Right. Which is the rule for most of these, and I have one. Yeah, that's really it. The last was, oh, is this still valid, was on 62-153, 62-153, that's annual adjustment of income. But I presume that the new state code will update that and we'll follow suit. Right. That's from 2007, so it's
Yeah, it's,
probably a bit old.
Yeah, that was the starting point. So we look at it every single year.
Okay.
I mean, we could update this if you would like, to make it more current. The last time obviously was in 2007, but yes, we could update it beginning, for example, January 1, 2020, and put the correct dollar amount thereafter. So,
Like a probably good idea, it's old enough
Yeah,
to do
sure.
that.
How about 153? Changing this.
And that's all I had. I'll open it up to the questions, comments.
Anybody have anything? I know we touched a little bit on it on our own last time, but not a whole lot because we left it for you.
Right.
You're like, ooh, taxes, nope. Anybody? Nope? We're good? Okay.
thank you.
Got everything, Tom?
Yes, I
Okay.
do, thank you.
All right, with that, then we will move along to agenda item number 6. Discuss chapter 66, traffic and vehicles, ORC lead member Andrew Knapp. It's me. All right, met with staff. It's kind of an interesting chapter because it gets into some very different areas when it comes to vehicles and traffic. The first thing that actually failed to discuss with staff, I just missed it in my notes, but I figured, Tom, you may have the answer to this. In section 66(3), advertising or selling from vehicle, it says it shall be unlawful for any person to operate or park on any street any vehicle for the primary purpose of advertising or for the sale of any merchandise or anything of value. How do the video trucks get around that? Or are they not getting around it and we should be citing them? Because I'm pretty sure their primary purpose is driving around advertising.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly, why code enforcement is not doing that on trucks, other than the fact that if it's going straight down Tampa Road or 580 or
Hard to catch
whatever.
him, and he's not gonna pull him over.
But, where this was geared towards is, for example, the big army truck that sat out in front of, like, where Chili's was for years with a sign on it. But that was the purpose of it.
Okay.
You may want to, revisit this, and, maybe give some direction, because obviously there are food trucks now that people use.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of cities want them in their cities.
Oh, sure.
But,
Yeah, the selling from the vehicle, I don't see the problem with so much as the advertising. I mean, I kind of see it as it can be kind of distracting. It's a big billboard and it's off in your further field of view versus something that might be passing you by. I don't know how anybody else feels about it,
What
but,
about an ice cream truck?
well, those types of things, like you said, a food truck, ice cream
Right.
truck, I think those make sense, and they are driving around selling, and
Because according to this, they shouldn't be though, right?
Yeah.
I would think so, yeah. I mean, they're hawking ice cream, so.
Right, yeah.
I guess you'd have to overcome their argument that the primary purpose is for transportation. My secondary purpose is selling ice cream. My primary purpose is getting from point A to point B. I'm just,
But if the
Right.
bell's ringing and it's a.
yeah,
for the
I
music
would just,
provider.
but to Tom's point, where if I parked out in front of Chili's for however long and all I was doing was advertising, I think a parked car
Moved, yeah.
or a parked
Right.
vessel is easier to say, no, all they're trying to do is advertising. If you're driving, it's just like, well, no, my primary purpose is I need to get home. I'm just happen to be selling
Well,
ice
and
cream
it-
on the way there.
But then the operative word is operate, so it's like, it's not just parking, it's,
Oh, sure,
in
no, that's what I
motion,
mean,
yeah.
yeah.
so. I think that kind of covers when they say, well, you can drive around too, don't stop and sell ice cream, just throw it to people.
What did staff say? What did staff recommend? Any changes to it?
Well, I said that was the one I missed discussing
Oh,
with
that you
them, so
missed. Oh,
I
okay.
don't know if maybe I can try to revisit with them to say if they have some insight to that, because it just,
It's almost
somehow
like-
I got excited about golf carts and everything else in here and missed the advertising on the very first page.
Yeah.
And I had it circled, so I can revisit that and bring it back.
Well, when
Send
you-
an email to Tom and Ann that kind of clears that up, because I think it probably needs some clarity to it. Or maybe it needs its own little subsections of sorts to break it apart from food truck vendors, ice cream versus these advertising vehicles that are there.
And
Into-
it may be that you just want to add exemptions.
Sure.
These things are okay.
Mhm.
Exempt them out.
Okay.
But you don't need to send Ann and I would just bring it back at the next
Okay.
meeting and let your committee discuss how they want to
Sure.
do it, but.
All right, that sounds good. Alrighty then. On the next couple of pages, and I may not have caught them all, but hopefully I did. Section 6636, paragraph 2, when it talks about loading and unloading, it says, and I'm skipping down into the middle of it, says, such loading shall take place in zones designated by the mayor and shall be appropriately marked. Well, I think it's, now, there's a couple where it says that, and then there's a different sentence that says designated by the mayor or the city council. And I don't know if all of that should be changed to the mayor and the city council? Or maybe the or is the more appropriate use of it there. But, so that was one section, and there's a couple others that I'll point out. And I'm not sure if I did actually circle them all, but, yeah.
Seriously, the
Actually, in
mayor
that
looks.
paragraph alone, it says it twice.
Responsibility.
Yeah, that should be something.
And maybe it doesn't need to be them at all. Maybe it needs to
Does it say
be,
the
Or
city?
something? City manager?
Yeah.
I think
Or
it
the
should just be
city?
designated and appropriately marked, and not, you don't necessarily have to
who's
have it.
who's doing the designations? Okay.
So if we take out the words in 6636-2.
There's two instances of it there. The last sentence in that also says, may be granted in writing from the mayor.
I
gonna
got some
be writing
boxes. Hey,
letters.
mayor, have
Yeah.
some boxes.
Right.
And that was last touch in 1980, so I see why it's sat there.
Gary Beaverland wrote that.
We'll have to revisit his salary if that stays in there.
Right.
So yeah, there were two instances of it there where it mentioned just the mayor, and then in 6640, designation of obedience to prohibited areas, the very last sentence, prohibited areas may be designated by the mayor or city council. Once again, there, I don't know how you kind of change that, because it says prohibited. If you're gonna go along with what you said, Tom, you would just say prohibited areas shall be designated or something, or maybe you do need an individual in that sentence.
Maybe just delete that last sentence there for 6640.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it
You
mentions.
just delete the last sentence. I
Yeah.
think that's what Paul is
last one.
Yeah,
suggesting.
yeah, that would make it work.
Yeah.
Okay, and then in the next section, 6641, for loading zones, Section A, it reads, "It shall be unlawful for any person to stop, stand, or park a vehicle on a street or alley for any purpose or period of time other than for the expeditious loading or unloading of passengers in any place marked as a passenger zone during hours when regulations applicable to such passenger zones are effective, and then only for a period not to exceed 10 minutes." Staff was unaware of any passenger zones in the city, and I didn't really know what those were. I thought at first it might be a taxi cab stand or bus stop, but was the next section.
How
So,
many decades ago was that written?
1980.
Those horseless carriages.
Right. So I don't know if the Section A makes a whole lot of sense in today's scope of things, or if there's a possibility where I could just see it as maybe it's a pickup drop-off place in an apartment complex,
You
or,
have
you know,
Uber now,
in
so,
downtown.
yeah, I
Right.
mean, you do have
And
people-
that's not a taxi cab or a bus, so there is this more modern pickup drop-off thing. So maybe that needs some language in relative to today's technological use of transportation.
So where this will come into play, and what I've seen it as, in areas where there are big special events like Clearwater, Dunedin, and so
Okay.
forth, they have passenger zone areas for Uber and Lyft to drop and pick up, so that there is a constant movement there, and it doesn't require a parking space for either Uber or Lyft. And so that would be perfect for
10-minute
it.
window,
And
yep.
so even though we're not using it currently, it may be that now every time we have Oldsmar Days, or we have, you know, whatever event, you know, we'll have an area set aside just for Uber or Lyft.
Okay.
And that would be considered a passenger
That was a
zone.
good point. All right. Then the rest of that was okay. And then let's see. In section 6644, there's another designated by the mayor, twice in that first paragraph. So, you know, we just need to change those to shall be designated, or whatever language that we need to insert there to remove the responsibility of just the mayor.
Real quick, if you want to back up for that
Sure.
642 where the bus and taxi
Yep.
cab stands, should we add to that, should we add like ride share rides or something? Ride share
We could,
vehicles?
I had the same thought, yeah.
Yeah.
Because where's a taxi cab stand anyway? I mean, it's moving into what Tom described, where you have those passenger zones,
right.
where it's just, hey, if you're getting an Uber or Lyft, you go over here, and this is where they come through, and it's a organized process.
Yeah.
Or even
think that's a-
trolleys, what if the trolley's gonna start coming through or something?
Right.
Well, and those paragraphs pretty much just say what you can't do. It shall be unlawful, so it's not saying I don't necessarily think it's unlawful for an Uber to come pick up anywhere, according to this. Right, because it's not gonna, unless it's picking up at a bus stop, I guess, and
Right.
it's not a bus.
So going back to 41, just for a second, I mean, I've had people who like throw parties on my street, and you've got all their guests parked down the street. Is that addressed in here, or is that in that? Because they're not specifically loaded zone, it's a street.
Well,
So during
and
that time frame, they're all,
they can park in the street though,
Right.
right? So, I mean, they're not loading and unloading people, they're just parked. And there's a little bit in here when it comes to parking, but
okay.
it's not a junked vehicle like it talks about it later in this
okay.
chapter, so. Yeah, I don't know if, I think that's fine as is, because it's not really, the primary purpose isn't loading and unloading. Okay. So, in 6645, Tom, if you can answer this, it's just, presumably all these fines are set by the state? Is that just kind of the standards there? or those things that we need to address? Staff didn't really have an understanding of that, where they thought it was just state set amounts.
Yeah, I don't believe these amounts are set in state statute. What it does is it creates under chapter 316, it talks about different categories of violations, but I don't believe it's actually set out as to what the dollar amount of the fine is. I mean, we can look at that real quickly.
Okay.
I know this came up the other night in Tarpon Springs, because they had almost the exact same dollar amounts, but there was no provision for parking in a charging parking spot by a vehicle that was not electric, and so
Interesting.
they wanted to add some changes to it to cover that, which I don't think our code currently covers that, by the
Well,
way.
and even if it's an electric vehicle that's in there that's not charging, then you're using a spot in an inappropriate manner.
Right, and so they added a provision that would require a $25 fine.
Okay.
I'm gonna look this up if you wanna keep moving along.
Okay.
And then,
Yeah, so I just kind of was general about the fees with that. I didn't really, I mean, I read through a lot with the junk vehicles and the hearings and stuff, and spoke with Greg about those sections, and he did not have any guidance on that there's things lacking to where he can't enforce right now or anything along that matter. He was pretty okay with how those sections are as is, which those extend a couple of pages. And then if we get down to the fun topic, golf carts, Article 4. There still wasn't a lot of recommended changes there. I talked with them about the fee that they collect now to register carts, and they said that's sufficient. It's basically just to cover the cost of getting a decal printed, and Greg is the one that the code enforcement inspector inspects the carts, and he's satisfied with the way that process goes, and his time is essentially covered through the normal budget process. One of the questions I did have with them is just to make sure, it mentions that there is a map, which they gave me a copy of. As far as streets, we really haven't had many new streets. The only ones are mostly over in Bayside Terrace, which is all private gated HOA. So it's up to them to decide what they can and can't do there. The discussion we had a little bit was when this all started, former city manager Haddock was like, we'll just kind of grant permission to use it as people ask for it. So that's why it's not currently citywide, where it is allowable, because there's definitions on what's allowable, where you can cross, and where you can commute down a street. So staff discussed, we said, well, should we open it up to Bayside Meadows and Harbor Palms? Because people are using them in there, and they're not probably currently registered because they don't have to be in there. I guess they have to be, because the ordinance requires that they have to be registered, but they're using them in there, and those streets aren't currently on this long list of streets that allows it.
They were used in Bel Air Village. I've been there since '99.
Right, which
They were
you got a
used.
nice blue section on the map now, so.
Well, that's when it became official.
So we did kind of discuss that to say, should we just as us as a group recommend to the council to say, if we want to be a golf cart friendly city where it is permissible based on state guidelines, should we just open it up and say that it is? And I didn't know that it was pretty prevalent in Harbor Palms, but there are definitely quite a few being used in there. So that's kind of a big section that is currently not on our list, and so people should could get in trouble, but the code enforcement officer said he spoke with sheriff's deputies and say, if they're not doing anything stupid, they let it be, but technically they could get in trouble. And then kind of the same for West Oldsmar, although obviously it's not all annexed yet, so there's very limited impact that the city could have to say where it could be used right there, because that's all, whatever's unincorporated, that's county roads technically right now. So their recommendation, or at least the discussion we had, was potentially opening it up to Harbor Palms and Bayside Meadows. And then obviously kind of the whole Forest Lakes, Fountains, north side of Oldsmar there, essentially. A lot of that's HOA controlled. So, but there are a couple city streets there. You have Forest Road and Pine Avenue. However, Pine Avenue, you cannot cross Forest Lakes legally, according to how this is written now. So I don't know if it really makes sense to touch any of that area, at least at this time. Obviously, the individual neighborhoods can make their own decisions there, and I know,
You have nowhere to go.
But I was
Right.
gonna say, it would be nice if you could take it to the rec center.
Right.
I mean, well, yeah, but if you can't get on Pine.
Right.
And
Well,
so
but-
Forest Lakes, I mean,
Well,
maybe to
like,
go
I'd
down
like
to
to
the
drive,
community
yeah.
pool, but I don't think anybody,
If I had one, it'd be an easy trip to take to drop my daughter off at Forest Lakes Elementary, but I'm not allowed to.
except you can't get across
I
Forest
can't cross
Lakes.
Forest Lakes.
Right.
That's a county road though, so there's not to say that some of the discussion I had with staff was you can get into this longer fight to try to get that approved, but it's not just something that happens overnight. State's gonna be much more difficult, but they were referencing over in Dunedin, Skinner Boulevard, which Tom, maybe you have any familiarity with that happened over there, or?
I'm sorry, I was just finished up doing the research on,
Okay.
on the dollar amount. What about Skinner?
We're talking about golf cart usage or crossing usage with Skinner over there.
Yes.
There was kind of the
Yeah, I can. So what the city did is they created zones, and the zones would allow golf carts to remain in those zones. The problems that we're running into is crossing a state road. They worked with FDOT in getting crossings in certain areas, and one of them was Skinner in Maine. And the reason that it was so difficult is there's like 6 lanes there, and it was merging in different angles and so forth. For a number of years, the city would not allow golf carts to cross any state road. So it's wherever they've negotiated particular crossings are they allowed to cross it then.
Sure.
So,
Now, like for example, though, with Forest Lakes, that's a county road, so I mean, it'd probably be some similar hurdles there, and obviously it's under construction and stuff right now, but
that's something
you
that the
foresee
city-
that there's some possibility that could be open to a crossing there at Pine, for example?
The answer is yes, I think it is. It would be something that we would want to work with the county on.
Okay.
But I would think that would be possible. It's a lot more possible to work with the county and getting approvals than it would be for FDOT. Yeah.
All right, so then that's something we can include in our notes to council to say, maybe it's worthwhile to look at potential cross possibilities for Forest Lakes Boulevard,
there's a
because
light there, I mean.
right,
as long
well,
as
and
you did
even
it
at,
with light.
what is
Sure,
it there, by Lakeview, TBSA.
That's
there's
a
another-
horrible intersection, though.
It's not fun, I've had an accident there, but,
And that's what we talked about when we were discussing all that stuff about the golf carts, you and I. But it's only gonna take one, and that's
Sure.
that's the thing, I mean, you're in a golf cart, I mean, Jared
There's
knows
no
this, but
protection.
no protection whatsoever, so, I mean, even a soft bump, and, the kids are in there, and then it's just like, we told you, don't do it.
well,
But
and I
then-
mean, it's,
Even poorly lighted streets, I mean, you could wind up in a ditch on the side. I have no experience in that matter, coming home from the moose at all
Friend of yours, yeah.
whatsoever.
I wonder, and I mean, I guess the point is, in order to have the infrastructure in place to truly make it a golf cart community, where Jared and I were discussing this once, and I said, well, where do you guys go on the other side of Tampa Road? And he's like, oh, we can get to Applebee's, or I think he said
Yeah, you got all those
Jack
restaurants.
Willie's or something.
Applebee's, Jack
You
Willie's.
could get there down those different roads. But to your point, where we are, I mean, I guess I can get to Salt Rock, but I can't drive on the sidewalk. And so, and I can't get onto Forest Lakes, and so apparently I can't get there. And so in order to have the infrastructure in place, it'd be millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars in order to do that. So what's a viable alternative? Is it getting some of those exceptions? But then that would have to be, they'd have to be so specific and so conducive to allow that to happen. I don't know how it'd be done. I mean, I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg with it, where
sure. And there's probably more work, especially in that north area, that's where it seems like more of the challenges are. So I think at least it seems safer, especially because we know it's happening in Harbor Palms and Bayside Meadows, to maybe at least recommend that they open that up with further consideration for,
Right, yeah.
for the Forest Lakes.
Oh, I agree with
area.
that completely,
Because
yeah.
like, if, say, for example, you over there, if you could cross a Pine, you could go to the post office.
Right, well, we go to the rec center.
Or
I
you
mean,
go to the
that's
rec
even
center,
if-
well, you can
yeah.
go to the rec center now,
Right, I mean, I carry my kids on the wagon to the rec center. because
but you
it's
can't go
much
down
closer.
Forest Road
Right.
to get there.
But that's what I'm saying, where it's just like, well, okay, I'll
Or
just take them
Pine.
in the wagon. Or going to pick them up from school would be something that's fun, you know? That'd be an enjoyable, it's like, oh, I'll get the golf cart out. Like,
And I
it's a
guess, I mean,
Beautiful day outside.
Technically, you probably could designate Pine, just that you can't cross at Forest Lakes Boulevard until that's resolved.
Right, yeah.
Because myself, like, having a kid now, it's like I could take my kid to school by a golf cart if I was allowed to go on Hayes and Pine,
Yeah,
but I'm not right now.
right, you're not, yeah.
So there's probably a little bit of opportunity there, but it's not as easy as a big chunk as a couple of these neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Everybody on board with that?
Yep.
Sound all right?
I agree.
Because you have it in your neighborhood, right?
In East Lake Oaks,
Yep.
yes, but then in Harbor Palms, I mean, you get to the end of East Split Fork, you can't go anywhere then. So.
Right.
So what is
It'd
the
be nice to
recommendation then?
To open up golf cart usage in Harbor Palms and Bayside Meadows, all the streets in those subdivisions. And then potentially the main, kind of the main roads off of, in the Forest Lakes area, just with the exception you can't cross Forest Lakes Boulevard at Pine.
So what is the neighborhood? name of Forest Lake?
Well, that main road there is Forest Road, is that right? It connects from Forest Lakes over to the Pine by the rec center. So Forest Road, then Lakeview, is that right? Is that the one that doesn't go through
Lakeview's
the
main drive
neighborhoods?
that comes in at the light. At the.
Right,
at
that
the
goes down to
state
the
rate.
elementary school,
Yeah.
right?
That's
Lakeview,
Lakeview.
so Lakeview between Forest Lakes and Pine? Because, well, on the other side, is that in the HOA then? Lakeview on the west side of Forest Lakes?
We're talking east or west here?
You got me confused and turned around. Tell me where you're talking about.
Oops, I'm
It's
sorry.
okay, no problem. I didn't know where to put that.
So this is
Up here.
Lakeview, right?
No,
Oh, there we are, okay.
this
Yeah,
is
that's Lake-
the light right
yeah,
there.
This is all HOA in here,
Mhm.
all of that.
So that's up to your determination to use that, but this right here that goes between Suncatch and Fountains One
Right, that's,
is City Road, I believe.
yeah, I don't know.
Right.
That's the one that goes to the school.
Mm-hmm.
But then could you, what's this road right here?
This
That's
is Pine. So Pine, and right now they say Pine south of 580 you can use, but then we could say Pine north of Tampa, but you cannot cross
Unless you fixed
Forest
that,
Lakes unless that gets
which
addressed.
would open up the rec center.
Yes.
And you've got that park by the fire station.
Park is at the fire station, so then it would be Hayes
Mm-hmm.
and potentially Douglas west of Commerce.
You basically have
because
that
there's
circle,
residential
right?
there, too.
It'd be that circle, right? So Lakewood, Pine, Forest, Lakewood. I mean, you'd have that. If you could cross Forest Lakes twice, I think.
Potentially, although part of it's in, well, Forest is the one that's the circle, right?
Forest, and then you'd have to get up. Yeah, I guess you have to get up.
So I mean, I can just go off the map, Tom, and just write a few of the street names there to,
Yeah, in case you didn't know, Forest is a four-wheel off-roading path. Did you know that?
a lot of action back there.
Oh,
huh?
yeah. Go
I can
four-wheel and then
sometimes
digging
hear
up
it
that
back in
grass
the-
back there,
yeah.
So it's like off-roading.
Plus,
So
we
why
got
not
that
golf
nature
carts?
preserve too,
Right,
so we
right.
have to watch out for deer and turkeys and turtles and stuff.
Right. So I
So
guess,
if you could provide the list then and maybe have the committee look at that list the next time that we meet.
Okay.
and So we have clear direction as to which ones.
okay,
I've written down all streets in Harbor Palms, Bayside Meadows,
Mm-hmm.
in addition to that Forest Road and Lakeview between Forest Lakes and Pine. And then there was a question on Pine Avenue South, the reference of south of State Road 580. We'd need to address that as well.
no, I think that's in there currently. It says Pine, yeah, Pine Avenue south of State Road 580 is already on the list.
Yeah, so the question I had noted was, do we take off the south of State Road 580?
Well, I mean, you have the other section of Pine there, but that's in the industrial area, is that still South Pine?
Yeah,
it
I
south
think
of
you'd have to
Tampa
leave
Road?
it south of
south of 580,
580
and then
of-
north
'cause you've got
Pine
that
or just
section in the
Pine, whatever it
middle. You
is.
Want to open that up?
Right. Well, and you can't connect through anyway.
All right, leave
Dead
that
ends.
alone then. I got it. Okay.
So yeah, then I can just look at the map real quick here, and because I think that's my last thing with this whole chapter. So it would be Pine Avenue North, basically all Pine Avenue North, but you cannot cross Forest Lakes Boulevard. Lakeview Drive east of Forest Lakes Boulevard. Hayes Road. Douglas Road West.
So are you including all the streets within Forest Lakes?
No, because that's HOA, that's up to them to allow it or not.
So, can I just,
As far as I know, that's my understanding, is they kind of have the authority there.
I know we're
Unless it's-
listing all the streets, but right after that, in section 66109, it says the area of the borders delineated on the map dated March 2017. Wouldn't that just keep us from having to list every single street in every single area by leveraging that map?
I mean, it could, but I mean, I don't know if you can make the map clear enough to say like exactly what streets. I mean, you'd have to have it where you can zoom in and out or something instead of just this. Like, I wouldn't necessarily know. I mean, it's somewhat there. It's just kind of
Asking.
tough. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, probably doesn't hurt to have both the visual as well as
Doesn't
the
need to do it the same way,
clear
listing by
list.
street?
Did
Say
he
again?
list it by street? Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So it was Pine Avenue North. You had some reference. East of Forest Lakes?
Pine Ave, well, no, just Pine Avenue North, all of it basically, and just that you cannot cross Forest Lakes Boulevard. But that anybody on either side of Forest Lakes could take it on Pine Avenue North.
You just can't get to it. But here's what's interesting. So Lakeview Drive runs a good long length through that neighborhood. And we've complained to the HOA about the people parking on the side of the street, and the HOA says it's a city street and they have absolutely no say over who parks on those streets. And that people have wanted speed bumps as well, and they said, well, the city told us we can't have speed bumps because it's a city road for the fire trucks.
So, yeah, and I'm just not familiar enough with that neighborhood to know, it's like, what really is the designation of those streets? And what does the HOA have authority over versus the city
They
in your
don't know.
neighborhood?
Right.
Yeah.
So just tell them golf carts.
If that's the case, then I would say, okay, well, do we open it up further?
To the list.
Yeah.
So, and that brings up my question that I had back here about narrow streets. It doesn't
Oh, the alley
specify
thing.
what is a narrow street. That's 66-38, narrow streets and alleyways. So you can't park a vehicle on a street or an alley. Oh, leave available less than 10 feet of width. Well, you know, that's really interesting, because on Lakeview, people park, and they'll
the
park
street.
12 cars long. And
Along the
so
curb.
you can only drive on one side of the street, and it's a curb, and you can't see people coming on. And so I talked to a lawyer about that, and I said, whose fault is it? If I'm coming up and I can't drive in my lane, and I move over in the other lane to go through the street, and somebody's coming around the curb and they're going too fast, and we hit head on, whose fault is it? And he said it would probably be split 3 ways, the 2 drivers and the person parked on the street. So I'm at liability because somebody's parked on the road and I can't
Right.
pass by. And so we brought that to the attention of the HOA, and they said the city allows parking on that street and there's nothing they can do. So how narrow is narrow?
Well, and then it's a matter of, is it straight or curved too? Because I know at one point, like with my neighborhood in Hayes Park, they, on the original site plan, they were anticipating maybe doing some parallel parking along Hayes Road. But then that got nixed in the site plan because it was along a curve. So kind of
So
same
like
thing.
the
And then,
curves.
you know, you see no parking signs anywhere where it doesn't make sense that somebody should be able to park alongside a street. So I don't know if that's just something that maybe needs to be addressed, where there should be, you know, no
I'm gonna go-
parking
I'm
with
gonna
an
measure.
arrow.
I bet it's not 10 feet.
10 feet's pretty narrow. Is it that narrow, you think?
Yeah, and
Somebody's
people are
parked
parking
out
full
there.
on pickup trucks. And
Oh.
so you can't pass. It says you've got to leave 10 feet of
Oh, you have to
throughway.
leave 10 feet, okay, yeah, there you go, yeah. I would,
We have at least, Andrew and Galair, at least one no parking on a curve between signs.
Okay.
That's not really a narrow street, but it is on a curve, and it's a good thing.
You can't see, yeah.
And all you have to do is, you know, you designate it on both sides, and it has to be then enforced, of course, but.
And it's every day. It's
Another
not for a
comment
party,
on-
it's every day.
It's interesting, 66110, and then also referencing 66107. 66110C says maximum attainable speed of 20 miles per hour. Most of these carts you're buying today are going 25, 26.
I thought it said 30 somewhere.
Yeah, it says 20.
There's 20 in C, which is interesting because then when you go back to 6607, it doesn't require a speedometer. So you're relying on what to,
Yeah, sure enough.
how fast do golf carts go?
mine would be 23.
Speeder.
I won't tell you how I know that, I just know it.
Yeah, slow down.
It's not.
But I don't know if that needs to be addressed or if 20 is limited.
Uh-huh.
I think 20 is probably good.
Because if I'm behind them, I want them going as fast as they
Yeah.
can go.
Right, right.
Especially if you're trying to get around all those parked cars.
All right, so, Tom, do you have a comment about the parking there on some of the city streets where it could present an issue, especially around a curve?
I don't really have any comments. I mean, I think that it covers it, so long as there is 10 foot of space available, then whether it's on a curb or not,
Okay. I guess we gotta get
it'll still be
the
allowed.
tape measure out there.
Careful when you do it.
And then anything about Jared's point as far as the speed relative to speedometers or anything with the golf carts?
We'll have to post a radar gun, catch some of
And
these.
there's also no posted speed limit signs for golf carts specifically.
Right.
So how do you police that?
So it doesn't say you can't go over 20 miles an hour. It's basically, you know, how is the golf cart rated? I think that that's where that comes from, with a maximum attainable speed of 20 miles per hour. So if they're rated in some particular way, I don't know the answer to that question, but that's the way I read that. It's kind of like if it's rated to go no more than 20 miles an hour, then it meets these requirements.
Okay.
I do have one word, in the word enjoying a license. In 66-103, waiver of claim, any person operating a golf cart enjoying a license for such purpose. Is that the correct word?
Privilege.
A golf cart enjoying a license for such person.
Like you wanted to say entitled or something?
No,
Privileged?
Privileged?
can I operate?
Enjoying is a nice phrase.
And all persons who are- Shall be deemed- So basically, we're saying that we're just waiving any claim against the city. And any person operating a golf cart, person, you don't even need enjoying a license, do you?
Yeah, I think you do if you're on streets here.
Okay, I just don't, I'm just catching the
Yeah,
word
it
enjoying.
says-
And
That
the
was
word
passed
enjoying
this
just
past year.
seems odd.
Yeah,
A license.
yep.
Thought that was a strange choice of words, enjoying a license.
Anything about the enjoyment of a license? No?
No, I definitely think that we need to keep the reference of whether it's issued or received or enjoying. There needs to be something there because we need to tie that. We do something for you, you do something for us. We're gonna license you, but you're gonna hold us harmless, basically.
Okay.
Right,
So, I'm okay with that word.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, just to loop back to the streets again, Tom, do we, just to make sure we kind of, because I think we can get everything in this meeting and not have to come back, other than just the question of like in Forest Lakes, there's this discrepancy of, is it city street versus the HOA has authority to allow or not allow golf
If
carts.
if it's a city street, then it's gonna be the city regulations or ordinances gonna control.
Okay,
Now, the homeowners association may say, you may not own a golf cart, but they wouldn't be able to prohibit the use of them on city streets.
okay.
Because even if you're in an HOA, the streets are still city streets?
Some of, yeah, unless it's a gated private, there are private streets in some cities. I'm not sure whether any of these streets that you've listed here are private streets. I believe they're all public streets, city-owned,
Okay.
so.
So in
Yeah,
your
most
instance, it
are.
probably is a public
Hayes
street.
Park is
Your
the
HOA is
HOA of
just-
Hayes Park. Those few streets.
You believe that they're private streets?
I mean, it shows that the ownership of Hayes Park, like it's all outlined like that.
I don't know. I think that those are public streets.
Maybe. When you look on the property appraiser's website, it shows.
All you need to do is look at the plat, and the
Yeah.
plat would say all streets are dedicated to the city.
Okay.
That's how we would tell.
Gotcha. Well, then I guess that's, I don't know how far that opens up the use. But we can say, it's up to the council to say, all right, do they want to open it up to everywhere that they could instead of waiting for people to ask? Because obviously, people aren't asking in Harbor Palms.
Yeah.
So this is just your opportunity to make a recommendation, and, whatever your recommendations are, that's what we're gonna bring forward. So
Okay.
if you're recommending, but I wouldn't say, have a free-for-all, because that's not gonna go very far.
No.
But if you have specific streets that you wanna capture, then let's
Yeah,
go
I
ahead
mean,
and list
it
those.
was specifically brought up by staff that said they know its use is prevalent in Harbor Palms and Bayside Meadows, so, I mean, at that, the bare minimum, and then that can still be the standard, that if it's asked, or people are starting to use it, even though they're not legally allowed to on other streets, then it has to be addressed at that time. So, I'd say bare minimum, Harbor Palms and Bayside Meadows.
Yeah, so I've got Harbor Palms, all streets in Harbor Palms, Bayside Meadows, Forest Road, Pine Avenue North, don't cross Forest Lakes Boulevard, Lakeview Drive, east of Forest Lakes, Hayes Road, and Douglas Road, was it west? Okay,
Yes.
those are the ones that I've written
Okay.
down.
That leaves a lot of it tied open. Is everybody cool with that?
Forest Lakes, can
Neighborhoods.
we add Forest Lakes since I live in there?
Forest Lakes is a county road.
Not Forest Lakes Boulevard. You
Not
mean
Forest
like
Lakes
the
Boulevard.
neighborhood?
The Forest Road is what I wrote down. That's
Yeah.
where the.
Forest Lakes is a neighborhood off of Forest.
Oh, so you want to include the neighborhood of Forest Lakes?
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
the woods is
I mean-
back there too, I think, right?
Well, those are HOAs, aren't they?
They are, but they're not necessarily private, where we would need HOA approval, right?
Did HOAs want golf cart traffic in there?
Right,
Right,
It's not so much.
yeah,
because in our HOA, Dan
Wait.
actually approved
They
it,
had to give the okay.
yeah.
right. Well, and it's like the roads Tom listed so far is like, that's just kind of the connecting roads around the neighborhoods. And then, if then they see people going around on those roads or something, I try to leave it up to that point to say, well, it's not really approved right now in the neighborhood.
I see.
Kind
what
of
you
leaving that standard where it's, if they ask for it, they can grant it.
mean. Okay,
The council could grant it.
then scratch my idea.
But at least the roads that are not within the neighborhoods, it could be included now.
Right.
So that if somebody is driving, gets out of their neighborhood and gets onto the road, they're okay then.
Uh-huh.
I mean, yeah, but, to Tom's point, it's like, then it's just kind of opening it all up. Do we want to do that, or then is it, they say, well, that's too much, we don't
Yeah.
want to touch it for now.
Okay, I think we belabored the point. I walk out of my garage and then do I tow my golf cart to the edge of the neighborhood and then drive down Forest Road to Pine and then stop and then throw my kids across the street, tow my golf cart back to my house? That's what I mean.
Yeah.
But maybe it needs HOA approval. I mean, it's a bunch of red tape, which is fine. I didn't
I'm totally
understand the
fine
process.
with just leaving it at Harbor Palms and Bayside Meadows for now, and saying, then as it pops up elsewhere,
Right.
and kind of nixing the latter part of what he
That
went
makes
off.
sense. Yeah, I didn't understand
Sound
the
good for
entire
now?
process.
Well, let's say if we said yes to Forest Lakes, and the city said yes to Forest Lakes, the HOA still at that point has the opportunity to say No.
And we don't even
want
know
to
if they
ban
said
that.
yes or no yet either. That's what I
Right.
mean, where it would take that just extra line of research to say, hey, do we need proactive approval in order to allow this? 'Cause people drive on golf carts around my neighborhood. And there's no HOA people with cameras saying, don't do that. But
So why not?
still
put
need
it-
permission.
Have it be approved.
I'm fine with either way. I mean, just
I don't want you throwing
I
your
mean, we're
kids over
like the
the
bigger
street.
entity, right? They're the sub-entity.
throw them to your house,
Federal government doesn't care.
take them
you
to the
know.
splash park.
We're the bigger entity. We can say, yeah, it's fine. But if the HOA doesn't want it, they can say, no, you
Right.
can't.
Right.
Exactly.
can't use it.
On the
can't
other
display
hand,
it,
they can
can't-
say, hey, they said it's okay now. Let's get this
let's
approved.
change our HOA
Yeah.
to
Right.
allow it.
So would you have to have a parking permit at the rec center if you have a golf cart?
It talks about parking in here, and you're supposed to park to where you can get 2 carts in one spot. So maybe do you have to pay half as much? All right, I think we beat it up. So where do we want to go? Do we want to open it up to a whole lot, or leave it at what we know is at least very prevalent right now?
I say, I'm fine with leaving it at what we know is very prevalent right now, only because I think that's a step in the right direction. And then as soon as it starts opening up more, I think that's the stated goal, is to make it more of a golf cart friendly
Or maybe
community.
the recommendation that council considers wider adoption, Tom, maybe? Is that what we can point out as be specific with a couple things and,
I think that you should be specific.
okay.
It's gonna get tabled.
It's not helpful, and they're looking for something that would be helpful in
Specific
making a
guidance,
change,
yeah.
yeah.
I had never had one.
I'll take out everything other than Harbor Palms and Bayside Meadows. Those are
now.
the two they're gonna stay in.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a positive step.
Can we change that? Can we change the whole parking at the rec
We're
center?
talking
Is that
about
part of
paying,
the
having to pay to park at the rec
Pay
center.
to park at the rec
ordinance we can
center.
change while we're here?
I don't think that's in
Even at
here.
the beach at the end of
Yeah.
shore.
All right, anything else on this? We're getting long tonight.
I know.
Okay, moving along. Agenda item number 7, excuse absence of David Enos from the February 3rd, 2020 meeting.
Motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a second. All in favor? Signify by saying aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 8, assign chapters for next meeting's discussion, which is going to be on my birthday, April 6th, 2020. How about it?
Birthday.
We had, we already had slated in chapter 22 elections because we wanted to wait till after the upcoming election for that chapter, which is just a single page. And then there were 2 assigned but not scheduled chapters of chapter 10
And 42.
and 42.
So I can do 42 next month.
Okay. And then we had also pre-scheduled chapter 70 utilities. So do
And I
we want to
think-
get,
I think you wanted to return with exemptions for advertising,
oh,
that
yes,
traffic and stuff?
yeah,
Right, right.
yeah.
and then there was something in environment that you wanted to return with.
Yeah, it was just that one section I needed to hear back from staff on. So if you could list it, I don't think it's gonna take very long, so it won't be too cumbersome if we needed to add it on.
Okay. There are a couple long chapters, so do we, I mean, I think we still have the
Have
time.
me down for April for amusements. I have myself listed as April.
Yeah, I had you on there for April. And then,
Would we have time for
Paula.
Parks and Rec? It's only 16 pages.
I mean, if we want to be ambitious, I'm fine with it.
It's your birthday.
Yeah,
I
it's my
know.
birthday. Okay, well then, we'll revisit, let's just make sure we get this all right. We're gonna revisit the chapter I had tonight with the note about advertisement on traffic and parking. Or parking and whatever that one was.
66?
66, yeah. Traffic and vehicles, not traffic and parking. Okay, we're gonna revisit that one and revisit Steve's environment. Those, I guess, would be the first ones we'd wanna do. So that would be 26. Then the other ones that would be new discussion would be chapter 10, 22, and 70. That sound right?
42?
42, yes.
42.
Yeah, 10, 22, 42, and 70. So
22 would be a continuance, would it not? We brought it up, but we decided to table it till after the election.
well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, okay.
we kind of only briefly touched on it.
Oh, it's only one page.
10, 22, 42,
We have, is that 6 total? Is that right?
Tres, cuatro, cinco, seis.
Okay, cool. All right, so we're all assigned then. That brings us to conclusion. I just want to say, Tom, I really appreciate your comments from the, not the last meeting, it was the meeting before, I think, right? Yeah.
You're welcome.
Give us all
Spite
props.
of
I
using the
think-
word hell.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it's been really good, so keep chucking away and get this wrapped up and serve it up to council in a few months here.
And Andrew, if you're not here for the next meeting,
I'll be at the podium.
congratulations in advance.
I'll be at the podium.
Yes.
My well wishes. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? No vote required. Meeting adjourned.